Hello, and welcome back to Federal Insight, a podcast of OA On Air. It's been 87 days since the Senate passed by a vote of 69 to 30 the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The bill was the product of President Biden's infrastructure framework, led by a bipartisan group of 22 senators who split the package among several working groups to draft the text. Last Friday, the House finally passed the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, reauthorizing surface transportation and providing for $550 billion in new federal funding for infrastructure spending over 5 years. A mere 85 days later, we once again have the pleasure of catching up with former Congressman Nick Rahall to discuss the passed bill, the next steps for Build Back Better, the remaining legislative calendar of business, and a number of other things. Congressman Rahall is the longest-serving House member from the state of West Virginia and was ranking member of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. As the longest-serving member of the House T&I Committee, he was a leader in every federal highway debate since coming to Congress in 1977. Please enjoy. Well, good morning. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're here with John Cahill, our Vice Chairman of O'Neill and Associates, Andy Pavin, who is, O'Neill and Associates and from 7 Letter, our public PR firm. And obviously also it's been 85 days, I think, since we've last seen you, but thank you, former Congressman Rahall, for joining us as well.
Great to be here.
So we said we would reconnect after they passed the infrastructure bill. I don't think we thought it was going to take this long. I think we truly thought it would be wrapped up in September, but clearly there's been a lot that's been happening. What's very interesting is that I can only imagine the number of years between the three of you and the number of highway reauthorizations that you have all been a part of, from FAST Act to T21, MAP 21, Safety Lou, others. I'm very curious, looking back at those other reauthorizations and now what's been happening in a very public manner, and that everyone is kind of watching how this process is unfolding to a degree that they never had before, and not even under Obama. That recently, it's really been something that's been happening the last couple of years, that, everything as far as all these very tense negotiations, things that are happening on the floor, things that are happening in the social media space, it all kind of came to a head Friday night last week, and resulting in all the factions in the House, certainly between moderates and progressives, Democrats, kind of came to a head, and they had an agreement. I'm sure Speaker Pelosi was very much involved with that and her senior leadership in the White House, but they came to an agreement and they moved forward on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. They did that vote, and they also moved on a procedural vote for the taking up the rule for Build Back Better. But what was also interesting is that there's some unusual things that happened, including an agreement of these 5 Democrats who said that they would agree to go forward on Build Back Better if and when the CBO score aligns with the White House analysis on that bill for how it would be paid for in the overall cost. I'm just curious, what do you think things like these agreements or 13 Republicans voting for this bill, I mean, what does this really mean as far as the state of play for current negotiations and trying to get Build Back Better done, and then certainly trying to wrap up the remainder of the legislative calendar?
What do you think, Nick? You've been hanging out with Joe Manchin over there, so
let me say one thing. This is certainly a testament to Speaker Pelosi's abilities to get what she wants. The old saying, "Never count Nancy Pelosi out," proved true here. It's been a rough and tumble road, to use a worn out phrase. There's 2 things you never want to see being made. One is sausage and the other is laws. That's certainly proven true here. It's been messy, and it's going to continue to be messy. It's nothing new, except it is new. You mentioned, Jen, all the past infrastructure bills. Yes, I served on every conference on infrastructure, on transportation, since coming to the Congress under my first speaker, Tip O'Neill, in 1977. But we've always had bipartisan support for these infrastructure bills. And we ended up having bipartisan support here. We got 19 senators, Republican senators, that is, including Mitch McConnell, to vote for this infrastructure package. We had 13 Republicans in the House, including one of our 3 Republicans in our congressional delegation, David McKinley,
Right.
to his credit, voted for this infrastructure package. I give him high marks for such a vote. Shelley Moore Capito joined with Senator Manchin on the Senate side. They worked closely together and got that bipartisan bill through the Senate, now through the House, now to be signed into law any day if it's not already been signed into law. So this has been messy, yes, but the American people will benefit as they have from previous infrastructure transportation bills. They're going to benefit from this, and I probably we're going to see Republicans that voted against it be there when the ribbons are cut.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like in the past.
Yeah.
Just like in the past on infrastructure bills. They'll vote against it, they'll preach against it, but by golly, they'll be there when the ribbons are cut. Or the shovels are turned over.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you think in terms of dispersing? I mean, we've read a little bit about this in the last 24 hours and Andy should jump in here since he was at Federal Highways, but the challenge of now, all right, it's passed. How quickly can we actually get projects going, spending the money, moving the money around? I mean, I have some opinion myself about the challenges of that, but I want to throw that out there because obviously the White House has taken it full in hand to travel the country and say this is a great thing. So what do we do? What happens?
Well, it's important for them to go out and sell this. It's only been talked about as, you know, and you've heard other people say this, it's only been talked about as spending, not about the end result, not about the finished product that will be created, that will improve people's lives and will provide a lot of jobs in so doing. But you're absolutely right. This kind of spending takes time. You need project approvals. You need to procure, designs. You need to get contractors lined up. It will take time. And, we talked a little bit last time about the difference between previous reauthorizations, just the making of any legislation, to be honest, and today, where it used to be done outside of the spotlight, outside of the public view, and there are some benefits to that. There were issues with it that many people cited, because the question of who was represented inside the room was always a question, and that's real, and that's important to have adequate, appropriate and adequate representation of all people inside the room. But Nick, yeah, it wasn't pretty to watch by keeping a spotlight on every initiative, every conversation back and forth between interested parties on the Hill, whether it was the moderates or the progressive or the Republicans or the Senate and the House. And it'll continue to be like that. It's an odd place for many elected officials in the Republican Party to be in opposition to this, because you're continuing to be in opposition to things that will provide improvements for your voters, and provide jobs for your voters. And like I said, that'll take some time. But it was telling that Majority Leader McConnell yesterday back in Kentucky called the bill a godsend for the people of Kentucky.
Oh, I missed
Godsend.
that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because there's a lot of infrastructure that's needed in Kentucky, and that'll help people. But yeah,
Was
as
Rand
far
Paul
as
with him?
what's that? Didn't see him in the pic. Didn't see him in the shot. Yeah, what a shock, right? I mean, it is. It's an odd place. I mean, you've seen it. I mean, I think it's important we talk about the substance of this bill rather than some of the not just the politics around it, but the idea that there were conversations within the Republican caucus of the House to strip committee chairmanships from members who voted for things like new roads and bridges or transit systems in their congressional districts.
Yeah.
You know, unheard of to me, and I haven't been around as much as either you, John, or you, Nick, but just kind of stunning.
Yeah, it is remarkable, and you wonder how many more times that will happen over the next year. Not just in this case, but potentially other cases. I mean, they have to, as we all know, we still have to get to appropriations here. We still have to either get to the individual ones or the omnibus. That's a whole other kettle of fish, you know, and they haven't, not to go off on the tangent of appropriations, but they haven't reached the top line agreement on what they're going to spend. Even though I must say, our dear friend Dick Shelby, Senator Shelby, is, I guess, earmarked something like $152 million for Alabama already without having any agreement. But he's exceptional. You know?
And put out an opposing statement on the bill, but that's okay. That's fine.
Yep, strange. Yep, strange.
I guess back to the substance of this and looking at other reauthorizations, I think that, you know, there's some comparisons to this being, you know, the New Deal of our century or of our time, that this is the full effects of this. It's not just a ton of money or trillions of dollars. It's really going to have an effect and affect your lifetime and affect how you maybe go to work, and, you know, electrical charging stations. And there's certainly now a climate change and an effect on the environment now that is taken into consideration that I don't think previously was in other reauthorization. So just kind of looking back at previous works like that, I mean, do you think that we fully understand the scope of this and what this can do for us and how we could really seize the moment?
I don't think we fully today realize the scope of this legislation. You've accurately described it as transformational, and it truly will be. But it's not going to be today or tomorrow. It's going to take some time. But when you look at the numbers, and I'm the world's worst on numbers, but I believe this is bigger than FDR's New Deal. I mean, this is the biggest spending package in history, if I'm accurate.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so that's going to mean something. It's going to mean something good for the American people. And Andy's accurately described how long it's going to take before the rubber hits the road, so to speak, before we see the actual projects benefiting the American people. I just hope they'll have the patience. I believe they will, because again, this is something that is going to transform the way we live, and it's going to trickle down, and it is going to have a positive impact to every home, every citizen in this country who wants to see a better life for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. It's going to be very transformational on the scope, if not more so than FDR's New Deal.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think it's important, you know, as to communicate the benefits of it. Thinking for a minute about the party, the Democratic Party as a whole, I think it'll be really important that it's not just members of Congress or President Biden, Vice President Harris, but local officials, governors and mayors, who really can feel and touch the improvements that will come. And it'll, if we can manage to be coordinated as a party, it'll be really important to have those folks continually talking to their communities about it.
Well, let's face it, the states and localities have an enormous role to play here now. You know, the work on the federal level will go on at DOT, but they're going to have to do their best to rely on, to whatever extent they can, the states and localities. And I think Jen had an example conversation we had this past week with somebody at DOT who had some questions about certain types of projects, whether the states or some states are overwhelmed. You know, they've already have received or are receiving a lot of money and are stretched. and how to handle that, how to spend it, what the programs are. This is gonna actually expand upon that, given the amount of money we're talking about. So they're not gonna be able to presume, that's for sure. They're gonna have to work it and get the cooperation of governors and mayors, city managers, etc.
That's why this current nationwide tour upon which President Biden is embarking to not sell, but to educate, as Andy said, to educate
Mhm.
the American people across this country, in red states, blue states, purple states, whatever states. It's important that he get out there and do that education process and involve local officials in every one of these meetings that he holds, regardless of the political persuasions of those individuals or what they, from whence they come. Because they are the ones, as John has said, that's going to be very responsible for implementing this program. And all it's going to take is one little bad apple somewhere that somebody's going to find where there was misspent dollars.
Mhm.
And there's going to be enough people want to jump on that and say,
Yep.
look, we told you so. You're misusing our money. And that could set us back. So it has to be, the program has to be scrubbed. It has to be implemented correctly. And it has to have proper oversight from within the agencies, in my opinion.
So Nick, to that point, based on your history experience, do you think that there will be, at least in 22, I mean, do you think that Peter DeFazio and others will have somewhere mid-year or something oversight hearings, or to
Yes.
look at it? Yeah.
Yes, I think they will. As soon as the first monies are spent, perhaps. There's going to be something set up in the way of oversight, again, to assure that the money is spent effectively and efficiently and that we get the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah.
Because like I said, just a few misspent dollars.
Yep.
And it's going to be ugly. There's enough people out there waiting to jump on that.
Yeah.
Do you think, we keep going back to this of, the misspent dollars and justifying this and making sure people understand the impact and see that? Do you think it's because this is just like, again, not similar to other reauthorizations where we got this perfect storm, where this was always President Biden's agenda when he was candidate? It's just that now it's been met with the pandemic and COVID, where, 2020 spring, we were just trying to get money out as quickly as possible to the affected industries, to the cities and the towns, to the states, so that they could deal with testing and trying to address this and help folks who were unemployed and businesses that needed the money to kind of keep open and bring back employees. And now, unfortunately, in a lot of SBA, we're seeing some concerns with fraud or misrepresentation and misuse of funds, whether it be for PPP loans or other types of avenues. Do you feel like that, coupled with all this other money that's coming out that truly was separate from that, and this isn't a result or a response to the pandemic, but instead saying we still have a backlog of infrastructure, we still have all this to do? It's just very, very hard for the American people to kind of separate the two. It just feels like we're spending a lot of money and taking a lot of things and overwhelming the states. I don't know. It certainly wasn't the case. I have to imagine that you definitely didn't have a pandemic the last couple of reauthorizations. So
No,
and you didn't have the scrutiny that Andy referenced in his opening comments that you have today. You didn't have the social media jumping on every word that every person in Washington said, and then the counter statements covered like they are, and the back and forth in the public arena, and the bitterness that exists, even within the Democratic Party. You didn't have all that in the past, but you got it today, and it's a whole different ballgame.
Whole different ballgame, definitely. Any other kind of?
Well, I was just going to say to Nick's point about the president and the cabinet touting this. I mean, that's something, and this is not long ago. That's something that the Obama administration did not do when we passed IRA after the crash of 08. And I mean, IRA passed and money went out, albeit not exactly the way some of us would have preferred, but they really did not kind of get around the country and promote what had happened on the federal level. And, you know, I got to tell you, I mean, a lot of folks just didn't realize where this largesse was coming from. And, you know, many of the governors sort of took charge themselves, and it wasn't coming from state legislatures. So, so I think that the Biden folks learned by that, very much so, and now are going this other course, national course on their own. So, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and you have to get into local news coverage in order to sell this, because at the national level, what's most interesting are the conflicts
Sure.
or the complaints. At the local level, and it's always been a challenge. I mean, I could say I worked on a Senate race in New Jersey 17 years ago, if I'm doing the math right. No, 27 years ago. I can't do math. Sorry, 1994. And it was for a senator, Frank Lautenberg, who was prodigious about securing funds for his home state of New Jersey. And yet when we had the campaign pollsters go out and talk to people, it wasn't always connected. The bridge down the street that got built last year wasn't easily connected in people's thoughts with the senator or with Washington.
Right.
It was done at the local level. They appreciated it, they liked it, but they didn't connect it to him. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of repetition. I mean, I was saying to Jen earlier, and this is more about politics in general than the infrastructure program, but I think the dynamic that doesn't get talked about a whole lot is that over the past 30 years, there has been a commercial base that is self-interested in supporting Republican ideas, media outlets, from the Washington Examiner to Fox News to Breitbart or the Daily Caller. You go down the list, there are hundreds of them. And it helps to spread a message. And that simply doesn't exist on the Democratic side.
Right.
So when people talk about, the Democrats have to get their messaging in order, and that there's a whole lot of extra assist that comes that turbocharges the messaging on one side of the aisle that simply doesn't exist on the other side of the aisle. And that's why I think it really has to go down to a much more local level where people can see and feel and touch these improvements.
Yeah.
And with all the huge amounts of money being spent, even as we speak in a non-election year, on the media in the form of advertisements supporting Build Back Better America, supporting the infrastructure bill, there was a massive amount of money by who knows what groups that went into spending. Now that has to be rechanneled into showing the positive benefits of this legislation. And it has to be put out there in the same forceful manner it was to secure the votes, to secure the support of the grassroots Americans for this legislation. Therefore, call and write your congressman. It has to be that same type of expenditure of monies by these outside groups. They spent to get it passed. Now let's spend again to support it.
Right. It's a really important point that people don't ever make, to be honest. I don't hear people say that, but you're right. The minute it passes, a lot of those interest groups, they move on to the next issue. Done. Right. Thank you. All set. Well, it's not all set yet.
The U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. Long-standing supporters of spending on infrastructure, right? Even with Donahue retiring. No sooner this thing passes Friday night, they're on to criticizing reconciliation.
Right.
Take a breath,
Yeah. Exactly right, John.
That's a great segue into the timeline between now and the end of the year, which isn't much. So obviously the bill was passed by the House. It had already been passed by the Senate in August. I still think at this moment, we're still waiting for President Biden to sign the bill. So if we could quickly speed that up, that would be great. And now we're
next week, Jen, next week. He's waiting. He's waiting for everybody to come back to DC.
Yeah.
He has hundreds of requests at the White House to attend the signing, just to give you some idea of what's going on here.
Okay. In this day and age, I'm fine with virtual, but but I understand that, and certainly he does deserve the big splash. So they are out this week. They are, like you said, traveling for various meetings and presentations and promoting this. The House and Senate are back next week, which is the week right before Thanksgiving, and then the week of Thanksgiving they'll be back in their district. So we're expecting, fingers crossed, a favorable CBO score, which we know how those could go either way. And then if I was a betting woman, would say by the end of the week of the 15th that we would see the House voting on this package and sending it to the Senate. Week of Thanksgiving's out, so maybe we're looking at the week of November 29th, first week of December, the first time that we're going to maybe start to see some procedural moving by the Senate to vote on this. But a lot can happen outside of the chambers, in social media, in press conferences leading into that. I know, Congressman, you shared that you had recently met up with your dear friend Senator Manchin. I'm not sure if you have any insight, the $1 million question or the $1 trillion question, as to does he want to really get this done? Is it going to happen?
Nick, first, this is just amongst the four of us, so say whatever you have to say. All right.
Well, your time frame is very optimistic, Jen. Yes, Speaker Pelosi has to bring it before the House. I think she's made that those agreements.
Yeah.
With her fellow caucuses in the House. Speaker Pelosi brought the bill for a vote last Friday night, in my opinion, because she had several conversations with Senator Manchin in the days leading up to that House vote. If she did not, my gut tells me, if she did not have some indication, some minute indication that in the end, after all said and done, that Senator Manchin is going to be there for the BBB in the Senate. And he's not hiding his cards. I mean, as he has said, he has told the White House where he is, has told Senator Schumer. He's not playing a little cat and mouse game about this. In my gut, I have a feeling he's fed up with the progressives, quite honestly, and threw the gauntlet down, so to speak, in telling them in no uncertain terms, you bring up that infrastructure, but you allow it to come up in the House and pass it, or I ain't going to be there in the end. That my gut tells me that. I have nothing to base that on, nothing that he has said or except that he said he wants to be there in the end. He was there in the end on infrastructure. He was there on the end in CARES Act. He was there in the end in a lot of pieces of legislation that in the beginning, he had legitimate concerns. And he needed his rope with which to run for a while. And Schumer and Biden gave him that rope. Okay, go out, do your thing. Yell and scream. You're concerned about this, you're concerned about that. Fine. But in the end, and we'll address a lot of your concerns while you're out there running your rope. But in the end, we need you. Did he give that definite commitment? No, I don't think so. But enough indications and hints and body language that only one-on-one meetings can tell. And I'm sure he's had those one-on-one meetings with the speaker, with Schumer, with the president, certainly many times. Matter of fact, when I was with him at the Greenbrier, when it was, I made the joke, I said, this was when the president was abroad meeting with the Pope. I said, Senator, did the president have Pope Francis call you? And he said, no, but he would have if he could have.
No, it's your point though is fascinating, and I assume you're right because you've been there, but also because you're right. Speaker Pelosi doesn't usually leave herself exposed, and forcing this to a vote Friday night without any idea of what would happen afterward would be surprising. I think it's interesting too to follow on that idea that, I know it's inside baseball, but after all, after the House voted for the infrastructure bill, it didn't go home immediately. It stayed for a couple of procedural votes.
Right.
That essentially, you could speak to this more eloquently than I could, I think, but that essentially tee up the next package, the next legislative vehicle, so that they have already taken votes about the rule, about how it will be debated, and it's kind of ready to be brought to the floor whenever it's time to bring it to the floor, right? I mean, is that, and I mean, obviously those were important steps internally, I think, because it gave the progressives some sort of reason to believe, right, that we're already moving forward on this. But again, to your point, it also helps move the pieces on the chessboard to a point where it kind of makes bringing the larger bill to the floor inevitable.
Yes.
Well, I think we saw that a bit too on Friday. I mean, on Friday, I wasn't, working on the infrastructure bill. That was done, right? We were kind of texting and emailing back and forth with staff. I know, John, you had heard from folks specific to Build Back Better as far as shoring up some technical issues or things that needed to be addressed in the most recent draft, which had come out November 3rd. So that's what was being talked about on Friday, to your point, Andy, was to get that bill ready. And as far as from my correspondence so far this week, and it's, only halfway through the week, that the bill's cooked, right? It's baked, it's completely done. There's very unlikely to be any major substantive changes, and how it is right now is what is going to be teed up to be brought up to be voted on by the House. But I guess
it was funny to me because I happened to actually watch the final vote Friday night, and why I say funny is because if you watch it on cable news, there was like drama, and I'm thinking to myself, Speaker Pelosi knows what the final vote count's going to be. She didn't bring this to the floor to a vote, not knowing what the numbers were. People know how to count, and her whips know how to count. And you're right. My guess is within the Speaker's office, there wasn't a whole lot of drama to Friday night.
No.
I mean, maybe they didn't know the number of Republican members who would cross over and vote for it. Maybe they didn't have a hard count on that. But I'm guessing they had a hard count. I mean, there was a lot made of a handful of the progressive members, including the squad, so-called, voting against it at the end of the day, and what that meant. And I'm, same thing. I'm sitting there watching it, thinking to myself, well, they already know they didn't need their votes.
right.
So I'm sure there were conversations with leadership where a member said, I would hope, listen, I'm going to vote no on this for these reasons, but you're okay, and you will have a majority vote, right? And got the high sign and went forward. It wasn't, I would be shocked if anybody was shocked in the Speaker's office about those no votes from Democrats.
Well,
I'm with Andy. I mean, she knew exactly the number.
Well, and it's kind of like Nick, it's kind of as you were talking about Senator Manchin and Senator Schumer and President Biden being long experienced at these matters, and allowing Manchin to just move at his pace.
Manchin.
Yeah, what he needed to do, what he felt he needed to do. Okay.
Look at his home state.
Right.
He is playing very well back home. Go, Joe. Tell us progressives where to go. That's what he's hearing back here at home.
Right.
Yep.
You know, Nick, to that point too, what you were saying earlier, he, with all the meetings and discussions that Pelosi's had, et cetera, Senator Manchin met privately with the head of the House Democratic Progressive Caucus. In October, I guess. I don't want to say what date, but he did. I know for a fact he met with her. She's super intelligent. Yes, very progressive, but super intelligent and pragmatic, more pragmatic than people I think or understand. And, you know, she came away from discussion with him infinitely better informed about West Virginia, about what he has to look at, how difficult some of these issues are. And I guess he came away with, well, she's a lot more pragmatic than I would have thought going into the conversation. I think that probably was one of the turning points in all this, that once they get together alone, privately, had those conversations, okay, maybe we can do some business together. Maybe we can figure this out. And of course, you know, with the speaker pressing it, among other people, you know, that was helpful. And to your point about Schumer / the president, I mean, having hands off for a while and just letting that take its course was extremely productive. So I'm guessing, and we're all guessing, I suppose, but I think that, you know, Senator Manchin probably is there. It's just a question of, we don't know what that is publicly yet, what the agreement is. But this
We're not sure it's this year either.
No, we're not, which is kind of challenging. But I mean, it'd be better for the party and for the president, obviously, if it was done, even if it was December 18th, you know, just if you think you're going to vote for it the end of January, you might as well just vote for it in the middle of December, because, you know, anyway, we'll see. But I want to just make the point that they did meet, they did talk, and came out of it pretty good.
Oh, Senator Manchin, like I said earlier, has been very open about this. He's not hiding his cards. He's not, you know, his answer. He does press conferences. He even calls them himself. He'll meet with anybody and everybody, anytime and anywhere. He's certainly demonstrated that, unlike his counterpart from Arizona, who often appears to be hiding. Senator Manchin has not been hiding at all. Quite the opposite.
No, overt.
Well, and turns out he had a memo on the things that he wanted to see changed that he shared in July, right?
Exactly.
So he's been on this from the beginning. So this has been really insightful. To wrap it up, just a couple of predictions on schedules. So do we think that Build Back Better will happen before the end of the year?
No.
John?
Yes.
Andy?
I defer to these two gentlemen. It's a roll of the dice, I think. It'll be hard because, you know, members travel for Thanksgiving and the holidays are coming up in December. I just don't know.
All right, so we have a yes for December, a no for December, and then we have whatever Andy's answer is.
I mean,
Non-committal.
my heart says yes, but my head keeps thinking, here are all the complications. Yeah.
Well, there are.
Yeah. They are. I think the Senate will get it done, and they'll be back in our fearless Speaker Pelosi's hands to deliver it. And I think she's got a few more tricks up her sleeve. So I will say yes, it'll get done by December. Debt ceiling. Do we get this done in a bipartisan manner in time? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll look like a high wire act again because everybody needs to play their roles in this sort of kabuki theater. But yeah.
I agree.
Wow. Okay, I agree with you guys.
And then the other thing that, you know, we need to talk about is December 3rd, right? A very clear deadline, not only for, we think, the debt ceiling, but obviously we did a continuing resolution in September to address the need to fund the government. So we still have to address FY22 appropriations. Obviously, there are a number of member congressionally directed funding requests, formerly known as earmarks, included by both Republicans and Democrats. Certainly a number of organizations are really looking for those funds to be coming out sooner rather than later. So do we think that they will get done in an omnibus package by the end of the year, or are we going to have to do a further CR into next year and then take up a probes?
I'm a little in the dark on this one, except just to go by previous scenarios in which it's kicked down the road again, the can's kicked down the road again.
I'm with Nick. I'm not convinced that it's doable. You know, I know it's in many of the bills, the appropriations bills. So, okay, I'm impressed, but they've not struck the top line with the Senate. And Senator Leahy has tried and tried and tried and tried. And as I say, you know, Senator Shelby's been fully engaged for his own purposes, but that's not an agreement. I mean, I don't know how you quite put all those bills into an omnibus if you don't have a top line agreement. So until I hear that, I'd say now they're probably going to have to do a, I don't know, what do you think, Nick, a 60-day CR or something? Get them out to February? Something like that. And they could still do an omnibus then. I mean, there's no, you know. What do you think, Andy? Are you on the fence on that one?
No, I think that's absolutely right. Continuing resolutions have become just so commonplace over the past 15, 20 years that I don't see any reason why it'll be different.
I'm going to say do a continuing resolution from December 3rd, and we still get it done in an omnibus package before the end of the year.
Wow, a really, really short term CR.
Wow.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Keep the pressure on.
Yeah, keep the pressure on them. I mean, really, we know the staff's working on it, right? And they're motivated to wrap it up. So if they can just kind of get all the members there, we'll see. Well, again, this has been very enlightening. We have some predictions we'll have to follow up on, and we'll certainly, hopefully, do this again soon.
Well, hopefully, one of these days, maybe we could all actually be in the same studio. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
That would be great.
That would be great. That'd be great.